Good morning, everybody. Cowboy here, and it is Thursday, November the 20th. We have EM Burlingame with us. Always a pleasure, EM. Before we get started, take a look in the description. Got a couple things in there. One from our paid sponsor, Algo Factory. I created an algo for you all to see. You watch me create it. And also, you get to see how I turn it into code using Grok. And then I show you the tools that traders use to connect that algo or any algo, once you've tested it, to their brokerage so they can trade while they're not at the computer. It's pretty cool stuff. In the meantime, take a look at that description. We got EM Burlingame's, you got your Substack in there. I think I have your X link in there. And if you want to just tell us real quick before we get started where they can find you, your website, anything like that.
Yeah, so pretty much EM Burlingame at anything, including .com.
EM Burlingame at onlyfans.com. Got it.
Don't have that.
Just kidding. Well, you put out a heck of an article yesterday, and even well titled. I actually just had to throw it into the show title as well. The Panopticon Con. One of the things that plagues those of us in the truther community, if you will, is paranoia. Kind of puts everybody together. Everybody's scared and everything's being monitored and everything's being stored and everything. And you don't really hear a lot of voices saying otherwise. And when you do, you tend not to trust them. So I guarantee you'll have what you have to say today and somebody's going to say, you don't know what you're talking about. And that's fine because that's how everybody is. But when it comes to this conversation, you make a pretty good case when it comes to the amount of energy required to gather and store all that data, et cetera, et cetera. So I figured, why not just tell us what your thoughts are. Is everything we say being stored, every single little thing we do being tracked? Like, how bad is it?
It's not possible. So just to give a little background, my first company was building data centers. American Communications was my first company. Santa Barbara was the LLC. And we built high-end data centers, peering points, and meet me rooms for high-end at the time .com clients and for the telecom operators. And before that, I was with a company called Next Bank, and I built data centers with them under my boss, Sean Dean. So and before that, I was in network systems, and before that, I was in mainframes. So going all the way back to the 80s, right? So then after the data center days, the years in building data centers and data center systems and power generation and cooling and connectivity and all redundancies and raised floors and all that other stuff you got to do for a data center, I went into trying to solve the last mile problem with hybrid metropolitan area networks.
Can you tell us what the last mile problem is, Ian?
The last mile problem is okay. So there is the core, the edge, and the last mile, right? The core, the edge, and the outside. And the outside of the balloon, the last mile, is the connection of all of these core services and capabilities to the individual. And it's vastly, at the time, early 2000s, it was vastly more complex. And we didn't have a lot of this last mile connectivity that we have now in the form of your mobile phone and mobile capabilities. And what I'm getting at, and before all of that, I wrote little software games in the mid 80s on Apple IIe computers. And I'm an electrical engineer, and I worked on semiconductors, and I work on packet technologies and protocols and all these other kinds of things. So I've kind of been deep in the heart of all of this stuff since 1984 is what I'm getting at. Doesn't make me an expert, but it does give me hands-on, and it does give me the ability to talk to people who are the current experts in various fields. Excuse me. We still have a last mile problem. Now it's not about connectivity. We pretty much solved that in the form of mobile platforms, and even the mobile reach had to be augmented. It has to be augmented with Starlink, satellite based, right? So we're still dealing with somewhat dealing with the last mile problem, which is all this vast, unbelievable amount of complexity of connecting human beings to the core, right? The core communications and computational capabilities. We have the same problem with data and data attainment, data utilization, data storage. Now, excuse me, we do as much of the collection and processing of the data on your device native. So not absolutely everything you're doing is being sent to the core, sent to some storage somewhere, either in the edge, which is all the, the towers, the co-location office centers, the central offices, et cetera, right? And depending on what type of network you're on, all of these types of things. So there is no way possible thermodynamically and energetically to capture everything everybody's doing, particularly as everything everybody's doing is only expanding at, so here's the concept and idea. The core is inside the balloon. The edge is the skin of the balloon. As core capabilities expand, as the activities that are going on by people on the outside that are feeding into the balloon is constantly expanding. But as the balloon is constantly expanding, the last mile, which is outside the balloon, is expanding at a rate higher and faster than the core can ever keep up with, right? Because the volume inside the balloon will never match the volume, the unbounded volume on the outside of the balloon. And you run into even major problems with just what's called the edge, which is the boundary between the core and the last mile, which is the skin of the balloon that's expanding, which at some point it can't maintain thermodynamic cohesiveness anymore, and the frickin' balloon pops, right? And this is a concept people need to hold because for everything, because in all complex systems, this is the problem. The core can only do so much. The core has to be fed from the outside. The core can only hold and maintain so much, and then it becomes thermodynamically unstable, and it has to then expand. But as it expands, the edge also inevitably expands, and the last mile expands at an even greater rate. It's a near infinite expansion rate. At some point, the edge capabilities, so the tensile strength capabilities of the balloon, the walls of the balloon can't hold anymore, and the whole thing explodes, and then it implodes. So,
So you have the thermodynamic problem where as the activity that you're trying to capture expands, then the capability to capture that activity is not able to expand with it. Is that basically what we're saying here?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And
I always thought the technology, as it improved, got more efficient, smaller. Do you see? Let's just say there isn't a capability right now to capture everything, right? So how is that eventually? I know if you extrapolate it long enough, the answer is yes. But in any time soon, given the rate at which these data centers and capabilities have expanded and your knowledge of that, when do you think it might be possible
Never.
Okay.
It'll never thermodynamically be possible. And there's the issue comes down to not technology. This is the problem we have. People are looking at the technology, and they're looking at reduced form factors. They're looking at multi-core processors. They're looking at, electron efficiency, moving through, electron efficient circuit boards and all these kinds of things. The problem is not one of technology. The problem is one of physics, and you can't change physics. And what does that have to do? Well, it's like I wrote in the article, and I don't remember the exact number. It's a ludicrous number, but just erasing data, just taking a bit of data and erasing it generates heat. It's a tiny amount of heat, but just the vast amount of erasing a piece of data, this ever expanding amount of data erasure for information that isn't necessary, or actually if you store it, you cloud and confuse the actual information you're trying to store. Just the act of erasing a piece of data from even a solid state drive generates heat. And when you're doing the vast amount of this, write and erase that we're doing now, even for temporary storage, et cetera, there are two things that actually contribute more heat to the planet than all the human related things, than everything else that we're doing. It's actually air conditioning and data centers, computer systems.
And data centers require cooling.
Massive amounts of cooling.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's like 30% of their expenditure of energy is like cooling.
Correct. And where does that heat go? It doesn't get, it's, the laws of conservation of energy. You don't erase heat, right? It doesn't disappear from the universe. What air conditioning does is just move heat from one place to another place. But in the process of doing it, it generates even more heat. So air conditioning and computing related computing related cooling is adding more heat. Well, that and asphalt and other heat sinks that we don't normally have in nature, right? The capture, there's nothing worse than asphalt for capturing heat, right? And then expanding, releasing it over a longer period of time than it would naturally. And just look at cities. Right. And this is the other thing.
I must have missed something there. So is it that these data centers are encased in asphalt, or how is
No. I was saying it works like asphalt. It's like,
gotcha.
We are generating vastly more heat that is natural for our environment. The other thing that comes close to that is asphalt in cities.
Gotcha.
Right. It's not greenhouse gases and all this other bullshit. What generates the kind of man-made heating is this cooling, or air conditioning, and this the only comparable thing in cities is asphalt, paved roads, right? So give me a second. The issue that we have is two things. The issue with this whole Panopticon happening and being impossible is, one, the amount of heat that's generated just from the computers, the servers working and the data centers working at all. And the other problem is again, it's a core edge last mile problem. As you achieve greater density in computational resources, you generate greater heat, higher, more concentrated heat that has more impact on your processing. And so you have to have even greater cooling, even more localized cooling, which does two things. It generates more heat, even more heat that gets moved somewhere else, but it also requires, even though they're more electron efficient, it requires vastly more energy, electricity. And so what happens is, on another scale, is even if we could overcome these things, it would take so much of our economic output, right, money, to cover the cost of energy production, distribution, and then the cooling related to utilization of that energy, that it's not economically viable or possible, which is also bounded by thermodynamics. We just couldn't afford it.
So,
right?
I mean, I get it, but that's with the current state of technology. So
no, tech's not going to, terribly sorry. Tech is not, this is not something that's going, this is another part of the Panopticon lie. This is not a technical problem. This is not a technology problem. Now, the thought was maybe we could do quantum computing and it would dramatically change the paradigm. The problem is there's no such thing as quantum computing. Oh, there is in tiny scale in this massive system where you got to pour vast amounts of energy into getting something near zero, true zero fucking temperature to try and get some minuscule amount of computation out of it. So we do not, with any of the technologies we have, or even any of the technological paths that we are on right now, have any pathway that we're going to get to technological solution to fix this problem. Right? And everybody really should read the book Superintelligence by Nick Bogstrom. It's a brilliant book. It's a bit disturbing, but it's a brilliant book about this very thing. People misunderstood it, right? Because they, people have a misapprobation that when technology starts inventing itself, it's going to invent, technologies that we can't imagine. Well, that's bullshit. It doesn't work that way. It's only going to be able to invent technologies that we programmed it, with the technologies and the ideas and concepts that we program it with, because machines don't learn that way. Machines learn in either structured or unstructured learning. Either way, there's humans involved providing the valence, the assignation as to what the value of the output is. So this isn't a technical problem. Now, there is a technical solution, but it's biology. Our cells work this out. Single-celled life on the Earth worked this out billions of years ago, and it's the most computationally rich and thermodynamically balanced technology in the entire universe that we know so far. So unless we're going to move to biological computational systems and structures, there is no kinds of synthetic, artificial, and technologies that we're going to be able to create or ever invent that's going to solve this thermodynamics and laws of conservation of energy problem. But we'll put, we've got what, $10 trillion in AI companies right now, valuations. We got the FANGs, right? 7 companies that hold up the entire
7, yep.
Right. Wouldn't you put $1 trillion a year into the illusion of all of this stuff if you've got $10 trillion a year, $20 trillion a year in valuations, and $100 trillion a year in transactions?
Well, of course. I mean, we do talk about that where, here, at least in our country, for example, China seems to have leapfrogged us. Their technology has surpassed us. It's pretty obvious that that's happened right now. As a matter of fact, they were able to build chips that operate on a less than 1%, it requires less than 1% of the energy due to a lot of the computation that these NVIDIA chips are doing, which tells you that we're putting money into a company that's worth not even 1% of what it's really worth by that measure, by that value, right? That's a simple valuation, mind you.
Well, that's because if you listen to Elon and others, even, mutual contact, my friend Tom, right? Tom Luongo, although the whole intent right now is to move, and this is what the whole crypto push is about, is to move us from a return. So we were a return on labor economy for thousands and thousands of years. 40 years ago, we started to become a return on capital economy. We've maxed that out. That's not feasible anymore. So what they're trying to do now is a return on energy utilization economy, and convince us that there is reality in the economy because of the amount of electricity we use. I mean, they're openly stating it. But how are we using that energy in all of this useless nonsense computational stuff, in the illusion of this Panopticon and other, the illusion of AI, et cetera? Down underneath it is this attempt to move to this third return on, right? Capital returns on, or, money returns on, value returns on X. X was labor through most of history and still is in most all of the world. Then they went to capital. Well, that turned into the theft of everything and massive amounts of debts. And it's not sustainable anymore because 80% of the world said, we're not doing this anymore. And so now what they're trying to convince us of is that we are going to move to that electricity, and the utilization of electricity is this wonderful, magical, real thing. And that's what provides the faith and value that backs the dollar, how much electricity we use. Well, the only thing that can use that much electricity is just bullshit, made up data centers and computational and, nonsense. It's the same thing with banking. I had this conversation years ago with a very good friend of mine who's a very high level banking guy who helped write the Basel stuff, et cetera, and ran PwC's banking arm and all of that. East German friend of mine, well, former East German, right? He's young enough. The banking industry itself, the financialist industry itself writ large, is artificial. It's just all the value of these financial institutions is based off of how sophisticated and complex their banking computer systems are, their data centers, how many ones and zeros they're processing every day. It's all nonsense.
Yeah.
It has no reality to it whatsoever, other than the fact they put $3 billion a year into it. And now they're trying to move us as an entire nation and people to this belief that the amount of ones and zeros that we process is that's productivity. That is solid economic activity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And then when people push back and go, well, that's just nonsense. That's ones and zeros there. But look at how much energy we're using. And that's, there's reality. This is the greatest test of how successful humans are, is how much electricity we're using. Are you kidding me? That's like the opposite of biology. Biology is like every cell on Earth is like, motherfucker, I'm going to use as little energy as I can to get the most out of it.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
exactly. You know what's pretty interesting, EM, is that you hit the nail on the head. This whole return on energy economy they were just so setting us up for that for a while.
Yes.
And the thing is that when they had that whole carbon credit nonsense, right? We're all going to carbon credits, and we're all going to be about, ones and zeros. We're all going to about balancing the load, right? All these things that the bloody technocrats would always shove down our throats since the 20s. They really thought they were going to push us there. Now they're trying to convince us with this failed model where carbon credits have failed throughout much of the Western world and throughout the whole world. It's failed miserably. Now they're going to somehow, convince us, hey, guys, look, data centers, make up for GDP with data centers. And the funny thing is, it's not going to fly with the rest of the world. It's not going to fly with China. It's not going to fly with Russia. It's not going to fly with many countries who have real physical economies.
We just tried to defeat Russia with data centers.
That's it. With data centers.
And 2 million Ukrainian men are dead because of it.
Yep, exactly. But trust us, we also have deep storage gold. It's so deep. We don't even know where it is, but trust us.
And our technology is so sophisticated, like Palantir. Palantir sucks. I've used Palantir in my job when I used to have that kind of work. Palantir sucks. The only value that Palantir has is the Palantir analysts, who are actually some of the best analysts in the world, who know how to use Palantir very well. But Palantir itself sucks. Mm-hmm. It's just a tool. It's a link analysis tool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. But it's put out there as this, Panopticon major resource to spook us and scare us. And hate to tell you, but they put the Jew out there in front because everybody hates Jews. And he's kind of a spooky, odd guy anyway. So it's, it's easy
weird,
to,
man. He's
right?
So weird. He's like acting like Mr. Tough Guy. He's just they have a video of him. I saw an interview, I think, by CBC. They interviewed him. He's in the middle of the woods in like Alaska, and he's like shooting things. He goes, we're ready to kill. I'm looking at this guy. I'm like, if I were to grab this guy by the throat, he'd cry.
He's an actor. Most CEOs today are actors.
Right.
That's just all they are. They're playing a narrative role. They're not real CEOs.
Yeah.
Right. The only real CEOs are the ones getting wiped out by private equity.
Yeah. Exactly.
Quite literally, like a very good friend of mine has been wiped out by private equity twice. And I were just messaging day before yesterday. He's like, "Yeah, I'm not doing that again." I was like, "Well, how many billions have you lost already to figure that out?"
Yeah,
right.
It's an interesting talk there, like between, and this is a sidebar. I was talking with Ben Kelleran on Tuesday, and the difference between public companies, stocks, and then companies that are like privately held, and I know people have negative things to say about private equity, but by the same token, it seems that the biggest grift is with the public companies. So, wherein
not even close.
Wherein does the honesty lie? If you can't find any honest investments, public or private, then where do you go?
Small to medium size, but they're getting wiped out by private equity. Private equity is right down, here in Idaho in rural communities and small little businesses now. They're wringing everything out that they can before the whole system collapses. Right. I wrote this, there's two religions that are at war right now in the West, and it ain't Christianity and Islam. That's the kid stuff. The two religions at war right now are financialism and computationalism. And I've written articles on both of these. And there's an overlap between them because financialism, financialism in the 1600s replaced Christianity across most, virtually all of the West. We began to worship wealth instead of God. We worship, the divine providence of cash instead of Christ.
Yeah.
And then that ran up against its thermodynamic boundaries in all these complex ways. And so now they're trying to move us to the Protestant Reformation has occurred. Calvin put his thesis up on it's Calvin or Luther, I can't remember. Luther put his thesis up, right, on the church wall or church door, and in Silicon Valley 40 years ago, right, thou shalt compute. And now just as we went through the Catholic Protestant wars for 300 years in Europe, we're now in the financialist computationalist war. That's what, in one aspect, that's how fifth generation warfare can be seen.
Right.
And there's a melding of those because just like the Protestant Reformation was all a fraud, bullshit anyways, right? The whole Catholic Protestant fight was an artificial fight. It was made up to create create conflict and to destroy hereditary houses and natural balance of peoples in the land. It's the same thing with the Roman Catholic Church in 1054 being created to fight against the Orthodox world. It's all artificial fights. It's all, the problem is that we keep running up against these thermodynamic limits, and there's a damn thing we can do sociologically, religiously, or technologically to overcome the limits of thermodynamics. And oh, by the way, our cells and life on this planet is the most unbelievably computationally rich resources and literal functioning, right? Like you can use DNA to read and write data and store and compute. You can use proteins that are created by DNA. I worked on this 25 years ago, worked with some people way smarter than I am in it, right? But I tinkered in it. So biology is by far, we're not even, orders of magnitude doesn't cover it. Biology is vastly, vastly more computationally rich than anything we can do synthetically with electricity, right? With, semiconductors, whether it's silicone or graphene or anything else, and electricity.
So do you think that we have Jet Blake, who comes on here once in a while? He has an entire theory behind the harnessing, and I could even, I think, say the hijacking of biological energy for,
That's what fifth generation warfare is, by the way. It's
that's kind of what he's saying. So if we were to move on beyond the thermodynamic issues of, silicon and small bits of, copper, the fifth generation warfare, the hijacking of biological energy. I know we've talked about it from a standpoint of, if you're, online, they're going to make you divert your attention to this, divert your attention to that. Like that's one way to do it. The other is with the medicine. That's the, unhealthy medicine. And then of course now you have to go, buy the cure for the sickness, and you're spending money in that system. And so we have talked about those things, but if we can move into that and extrapolate how hijacking the biological system doesn't have the same thermodynamic issues, and if hijacked to the fullest degree in like your theory, what would that look like?
Okay, so great point. What has happened is we spent 40, 50, 60 years trying to push towards the singularity where we would upload into machines, into data centers, basically. And it turns out it's not thermodynamically and energetically possible as well. We just can't computationally do it. We can't even come close to that complexity of computation, not even remotely close to that sophistication of computation, data storage, power redundancy, all the things, right? Biology does it in a universe scale. It's biology's sophisticated computational energy neutral capacities are on a scale as if it was our planet versus the universe. It's that different. So what did they do? Well, starting in the, I would say, late 2010s, they realized, well, let's actually download this Panopticon software into everybody. and let it run in people's minds.
That sounds rather transhumanist.
Well, it is transhumanist. That's what these people are. They realized they couldn't upload the human software, or what they thought was the human software, into the machine. So let's download the machine software and control humans that way. So let's download the control software into humans so they control themselves, which is what Jeremy Bentham's Panopticon was all about. The Panopticon, and people need to go read Jeremy Bentham's, that's what the article was based off of yesterday, was that you could use 1% of the resources to control a prison population because they controlled themselves with their own thoughts running in their mind about who might be looking at them, who might be seeing or hearing what they're doing. And so they police themselves, right? And so on that scale, thermodynamically, biology has got an almost unbounded capacity to, now there's one major flaw, right? One major flaw is if people start to actually study how these things work, they can pierce right through that illusion, the deception, etc. Right? They can throw off this control software that's been downloaded into human beings, which in the form of the fucking Panopticon, like this Whitney Webb person. Great, she did a bunch of work. But who gave her all that information and who directed her all that information to sell?
The wellness company, I believe.
Well, she comes from well-to-do family too, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, and I'm not the only one, is maybe Whitney Webb didn't come to those concepts and ideas on her own. Maybe Whitney Webb, because this is what systems and regimes do, is if you want to keep the control software going, the narrative, right, the Panopticon, you give away the secrets of your grandfather. He's long dead. It doesn't matter. And you can talk all kinds of things. And you prove you demonstrate that you are a connected, deep thinker who understands, how the world really works. Why? Because you actually have a different message, and the message that you have, that you need the credibility for people to listen to you as an outsider, somebody who's really, pulling the curtain back. Your real mission, right? Your real message is the update and continuation of the Panopticon lie and narrative and software. And what does she talk about? The Panopticon. What does she talk about? This ability for what they're trying to do is this total surveillance. It's not possible. You can't do total surveillance. You can't even do 50% surveillance. We could barely probably do 1-2%, and most of that, on the analysis side, turns out to be wrong.
So even with like this, transhumanist model, and I kind of want to stick on this in a minute, because you have somebody in the audience who's asking a lot of questions.
Awesome.
One of them is the science of Nick Lane, whom EM discussed last week, a transhumanist? Are we the energy that is going to be quote unquote regulated or quote unquote rebalanced or something?
Okay, so great question. Here's the deal. The Matrix the movies were also a psyop, Panopticon psyop. The whole set of movies, humans, rah, fight against. And at the end, what does he do? He has to surrender to the machine. And then what did those two guys do? They went on and became trans.
Yeah, they did. The Wachowski brothers became the Wachowski sisters.
So the whole Matrix things, and this gets back to Whitney Webb because it's the exact same pattern. The whole Matrix movies were a psyop to get us to believe that the machine is all powerful and that we can't break free of the machine. And so we better humble and bow, bend the knee in front of the machine and come to some agreement with it. It was all a psyop.
Well, the original Matrix actually had a concept where even if you completely got out of the machine, the entire universe that you were in was still a different kind of containment system.
Yeah.
And they tried to make it seem like it was spirituality or, whatever Eastern looking religion type thing it was.
Yeah.
I know we talked about this doing kind of a Q&A at some point. So I don't know if today is the day for that, but this person has a lot of questions for you. I think it's the same person who had a lot of questions on Rumble last week by a different name or somebody they know. So, and they are, what's the term? relevant to what we're talking about. Man, someone's blowing me up. Apologies. My phone's actually malfunctioning right now. Hold on a second. I don't know what's
Put that on mute, bro.
No, yeah, well, it should be on mute. Anyway, apologies for all of that. Let me go back to some of these questions because it's all relative to what we're talking about. Okay. Maybe we'll come back to some of those, actually. Here's one. It says EM, I'll put it on the screen. EM advises a feudalism. How will technology be used for governance in his vision of feudalism? Will there be freedom of movement, social credit scores? What sort of rights will people have?
Depends on who the feudalist overlords are. You have feudalism now. It's called tax feudalism. It's bureaucratic feudalism. That's in the book, The Eternal War, that I wrote. People don't understand. You're already in a feudalist state. The American system is a feudalist system. It came directly out of the English manorial system. Right. It's just you are tax serfs. Now, there were checks and limits on that until, Woodrow Wilson, really. And then it took off under FDR when they really embedded the fascist, Mussolini-style fascist, right? People think fascists are Nazis. Nazis were National Socialists. They weren't fascists. Fascists were Italians. Read the 1932 Benito Mussolini speech. They're both Marxists. Mussolini and the other gentleman, I can't remember his name, who wrote the fascist manifesto, were former Marxists. But they realized that didn't quite work. Marxism, as in the form of the communist, National Socialist stuff, wouldn't work. So they went for fascism. But you're in a feudalist system already. It's just who's your feudal overlord, the state. At every level, you have multiple feudalist lords, just like a feudalist system. The only difference is this is an unaccountable feudalist system, because at least in a hereditary feudalist system, you knew where that son of a bitch lived, and you go tear him out of his bed at night with pitchforks and torches. Now you have an unaccountable feudalism with bureaucrats, unnamed bureaucrats who manage the feudal estate, and this illusion of politicians who have real power, and they don't. They're just theater kids. They're just theater kids, and they're replaceable, and virtually none of them ever go to jail. And the real power in this feudalist state is the judges. And I think, if I remember correctly, there's only been something like 3 federal level judges that have been impeached in the entire 250 years of this country. 3. And the last one was like over a century ago.
Yeah, well, that's like the fox guard the hen house. Good luck with that. So back to this question then, obviously your answer is it depends, right? It depends what kind of feudalism we have. Well, I mean, if you were to get and I'm going to just expand this question. If you were to get the feudalism you think we should have, then what would would there be freedom of movement, social credit scores? What sort of rights would people have? Like, to just re-ask that question in a way that I think this person meant to ask it.
We already have social credit scores in the form of social status. People need to understand something. We have social credit scores. Now, what they're talking about is an artificial, right? An externally system mandated, civil law style prescriptive credit score. But we already have social credit scores in the form of actual credit scores, in the form of how the community, now it's much bigger because we're online, but how, where do you fit socially in the social network and connections that you have? Credit scoring, social credit is the most human thing that there is. It's what we do. We start learning when we're little kids.
And so no one uses your words out of context, because I know they really want to. I think what they're more asking is this they're asking whether or not there's going to be a technologically mechanized social credit score where because you said the wrong thing online,
doesn't work.
Okay, that's what they're asking.
Yeah, I know that they're asking, but what I'm getting at is people are using these things like they're scare tactics, and the problem is we already have these things. Right? This gets to the whole topic of the conversation. Everything that people are bitching about or worried about, we already have. You just don't use those words for it.
Right.
It's all part of the con. It's all part of this control con. Right? They cannot do these things. They're not possible. China doesn't do this. 99.999% of what people think about China is total and absolute bullshit, and they've never even been to fucking China, ever.
Yep.
And they don't speak, read, write Chinese, and nobody in their family ever has. Everything that China's doing with the China firewall is to actually try and prevent a color revolution by us.
That I believe. I mean, you know, being somebody, I haven't been to China since 1998, and I was only there for 3 days, and I didn't really experience it. So you can put me in the category of I've never really truly been to China, right?
I'll chime in from somebody who's running who's a part owner at one point of a credit repair business, right? And having close ties to Equifax and TransUnion and Experian.
Yeah.
In 2012, I warned everybody that there's going to be a point where this was an old interview I did with Doug Hagman, I believe, on Doug Hagman's show back in 2012. I said that there's going to be a point in the future where your social media, what you're posting on social media, what you're posting, and what all your buying habits online and whatnot is going to be amalgamated with, amalgamated with what your credit scores are from these credit unions. That these things are going to eventually evolve. That the credit unions are going to go away, and one of the ways that it's going to happen is you're going to start hearing of hacks, massive hacks, and data breaches and whatnot. And that's what we've seen throughout the course of the decades. And people are moving away from the traditional credit reporting bureaus. And what EM says is right. We are already living in a techno feudalism, right? I mean, think about it. If you want to get a car insurance, right? What is the first thing they ask you is we're going to run your credit score to see what rate. Not, hey, what's your history of driving? Not, what are the actual
payments or even payments?
Yeah. We're already to that point where like we're bleeding data. Like companies that shouldn't be asking you about your for your social security number and this, that, and the other are starting to ask you for that. Employers are not only doing background checks on, hey, what's your employment history? Do you have experiences? What are you posting online? Are you some sort of liability? This shit is already here. You don't understand how fucked the average American is. And guys like EM, Nick, several others who see this shit on a day-to-day basis are telling you, guys, it's here. You can say tomato, we can say tomato, but you're still in the thick of it. And they're graduating it further and further, and all the while the Americans are like, at least I'm not like it could be worse than like the Chinese, working in a sweatshop. Folks, I'm telling you, it's like we're there, guys.
Okay, but here's the problem that we have. Okay, I completely agree with you. We were working on. So I was with a company called Next Bank. We went public in '96, I think. And we were already then doing consumer credit company, and we were one of the first ones using sophisticated algorithms to do credit scoring and rating on people automated, and get them credit into the credit cards. Right? We were doing it in the '90s, mid '90s. So here's the problem that we will have here is the thing that those who've worked on the inside of these things know. They don't have the control. They don't have the computational algorithmic complexity or sophistication to do these things, this total absolute control. And as the amount of information and communications that people do expands exponentially, the ability to process and analyze and actually compute whether, what some value of a human being is becomes even less capable. The issue is that 99, all of these control systems are already in place everywhere and everything, and they don't work. It still takes somebody to complain. Some human being has to actually make a formal complaint against you for you as an individual to rise up in any system. And Twitter is a prime example.
Yeah.
Right? So the issue is that this attempt at this is where we are. This is why they're trying to build out all these data centers. They're trying to convince us this move to return on energy, economy, et cetera, is because the Panopticon has failed. It's already embedded. It's been embedded for increasingly over the last 30, 40 years into everything at every scale, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
At all. Right? You can't do the targeting. You can't do this. And I'll tell you, as a guy who was a targeting guy, targeting human beings for, exercise, right? To exercise,
Yeah.
right? Finish. You can't use the technologies. They suck. In fact, if you try to use the technologies 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, you're going to get the wrong guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
And this is why we didn't defeat Russia in this war, that we threw everything at Russia, all of these technical capabilities, all of this. And it turns out the only thing that they were able to do was deceive people. And
Right.
roughly 2 million Ukrainian men have died for it, and 150,000, 160,000 Russian men. It turns out none of this stuff, and they tried, so-and-so in Palantir and automated targeting and all that in Gaza. Well, we're 2 years, 3 years into that. Didn't work there either.
Yeah.
Right. So the point is the only thing that works is that we believe it works. That's the point of the article I wrote yesterday. And this is the great, I've written several other articles called Great Deception, and then et cetera. People need to go back.
Well, it's just like our economy, EM.
Correct.
We believe it's a make-believe economy. It works because we believe it works.
Correct.
It's insanity.
Well, and it doesn't. Yeah, that is exactly the case. So this took me decades and decades and decades of studying and doing everything I get my hands on and working across numerous different major industries. It took me decades to finally realize the Great Deception. And it's astounding because if you read a real history book, you realize the Great Deception has been with us since Egypt, ancient Egypt, Sumeria, right?
Yeah.
They are not capable of this total control. It's not thermodynamically, energetically, computationally capable. It's not possible. What they can do is put a vast amount of money every year into convincing us it's possible, and it works.
Right.
Right? So if I have $100 trillion economy, I put $40 trillion a year, a made up economy, right? Or made up theft system or whatever. I put $40 trillion a year into the illusion of it until it finally you run up against hard laws of thermodynamics and laws of conservation of energy and Maxwell's equations, and you can't sustain the lie anymore. And then what do? You replace the people with people who from outside, who come from less sophisticated, less complex systems, who are energetically less expensive. And you just download the Panopticon software into them, right? The Great Deception into them, and then you just rinse and repeat and run. And you build them up for 200, 300 years until that collapses. But everything accelerates, so that's probably only going to be about 40 years before that one collapses.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So
it's interesting that, we have this sort of fear tactic of the Chinese social credit system. Now we have a technology that pretty much is what we're seeing here through somebody who, you spent how many years in tech?
40.
Yeah. So basically what
41.
you're saying is that it's okay. When they did the Obamacare website back in, whenever that was, do you guys remember what an abject failure that website was?
At $3 billion?
At $3 billion, they had $3 billion. They couldn't put together a website for healthcare. It was
they didn't want to, because it wasn't the point, right? I knew 16-year-old kids could have done it for $300.
Yeah,
right.
The
Literally.
point is wealth extraction.
The point is the money spending. I'll give you another example. So the Bay Bridge in San Francisco, right? Bay Bridge in San Francisco, when we had the 89 Loma Prieta, the Oakland side of it was damaged and really did genuinely actually needed to be replaced. Right, and it also aged out. Right, it was built in the 1930s, 20s and 30s. The estimate for the bridge was about $900 million, and that's legit, right? For all the seismic stuff. You want to take a guess at what the bridge finally ultimately cost?
What was the original estimate? 900 million.
900 million.
It probably cost
3 billion.
9 billion.
10.
Jesus,
I said 9.
Almost $11 billion.
Holy God. And it probably took them 15, 20 years to make it.
Well, they got it up in 4 or 5 years because
Yeah.
they make 250,000 cars a day go over the Bay Bridge, and so they make a fuck ton of money off of that.
Right.
They have an
Right.
incentive to get it
So
up.
they had an incentive, and it's okay looking bridge, but the actual cost of building the bridge was something like $400 million. But
Wow.
the bonds and the issuance and the total sticker price for it was over $10 billion, almost $11 billion. Why? Because it wasn't a building project, it was an extraction project. It was a wealth extraction project.
Well, and so wealth extraction by a group of oligarchs versus like how are things done in
This
China?
wasn't oligarchs, this was government.
Whatever it might be.
Yeah.
In China, like V and I have talked about the Chinese system, which is basically what was, according to V, you said that it was originally the American system that they've adopted in China.
Yeah, political economy. Yeah.
And I'm going to say something, and I'm just going to repeat what V said yet again. I get a fair amount of intel from my boy V here. So basically, V, did you say that in China, the power of money is not allowed to rise above the power of the state? Is that how you said it?
Correct. Yep.
Correct.
So with that being the case, whether you can call it the government or oligarchs, name it, it's all the same shit. These are people who want to steal from you. So in China, apparently they execute billionaires who commit egregious crimes. Is that correct?
And bureaucrats.
And bureaucrats.
And bureaucrats. Yeah.
So you have essentially like a system that I don't know that much about, but when you have bureaucrats and billionaires who are supposedly, like in the US, they hold all the power, right? Like I'm sure there's people above them, and we can go into that conversation later. But bureaucrats, wow, that's pretty good actually. Billionaires and bureaucrats being executed in China for egregious crimes, graft, corruption, things like that. That doesn't happen here. And yet China is this country where we all think is really bad, and they have the social credit score and all these things. But it seems to me that China actually puts the power of the nation state, their nation state, above the money interests. Am I saying
Correct.
that properly?
But it's not the nation state. China puts Chinese peoples and Chinese civilization even above the state.
Exactly. But guys, Epoch Times, the Falun Gong affiliated news channel, CIA affiliated news outlet told me otherwise.
It's MI6.
So I want to stick on this for a minute because it's relating to this person in the chat who just has a lot of questions. So what is your opinion, EM, on the place and importance of the nation state versus the money interest versus civilization? Where does the nation state fit in?
Nation state is the extraction mechanism created in the Peace of Westphalia and the Inglorious Revolution in the 1600s to enable the extraction, to remove hereditary princes, which were the only counter to the extraction. Nation state, the state is a made-up thing in the last 400 years. And it was specifically made up by the Venetian Dutch banking system that would then become the City of London in 1688, 1694 was instantiated with the Bank of England. But the Peace of Westphalia, right, Treaties of Innsbruck and Munster, 1645, 1649, is what put in place the nation state. And the nation state had two enumerated powers: the legal use of violence internally, and between under internet, what would become labeled as international law, and the control of your exchequer, money. Right? Those are the only two. Okay, well, why were those two enumerated powers? So why was the nation state created, taken away from, removing hereditary princes, creating a nation state, and then giving it those two legal powers? Well, because you need control of the exchequer for the extraction, because that's the extraction mechanism, and you need to be able to use violence, legally use violence to enforce the extraction. That's nation states. And Michael Hudson, Professor Michael, I think he's a professor. I don't, the economist and economic historian, does this brilliantly. He articulates this in great detail. Now he's a bit Marxist and an older boomer, so he's got that era's concepts and ideas. But his proscription and his historical record of these things is extraordinary. Yeah. The only check on oligarchy is monarch, is a strong, capable monarch, and that a strong, capable monarch only exists if you have a strong, capable nobility, because they're the only ones who can fight. And this is what we see Putin doing in Russia. It's why Russia's bad. Russia's got to fall. Why
They're
China
evil.
bad? China's got to fall, because they're acting like monarchs. And they are, and what are they doing? They are fighting this extraction mechanism that is this nation state.
Interesting.
Right?
So we're at that point, like the nation state that we have, and maybe I don't understand the concept of nation state that well. Perhaps, like maybe I'm having it in my mind in a place where it's not. But doesn't our Constitution come from the formation of our nation state?
No, the Constitution, I mean, it happened actually after the formation of the United States of America. People got to look at what is the United States legally? It's a land trust held in the city of London. Right?
You mean what it is legally now, or from
Legally
its inception?
structured. Well, it's been that since the 1700s. Right? People need to understand that the United States, people don't even look at it. They go, the Constitution, great. Okay, well, the Constitution does not, the Constitution articulates governance, how the people will organize themselves and work and engage with one another, and the checks and balances of power there. It talks nothing at all about the actual legal formal structure or status of this continent and these borders as a formal entity. We just assume that, right? And this is the thing. What are the Chinese about? They don't give fuck all about China as a state. What they care about is the Chinese people and the Chinese civilization that is in this geographic space. What do the Russians care about? The Russian state? They couldn't give fuck all about the Russian state. They're Russians, and they care about Russian civilization. And that is within these geographic borders that they will fight for. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It is only the oligarchs, and this, Plato talked about this 2,000 plus years ago. Others have talked about this. Michael Hudson does it very well, and I would really go to him. He's way more knowledgeable in these things than I'll ever be, right? The nation state is an illusion. The only thing that's real is geography that men will stand and fight for. Everything else above that is an artificial construct, abstraction. If you want to call it the nation state itself, well, what is the nation state? Again, go back to the Peace of Westphalia, look at the treaties of Innsbruck and Munster and the follow-on treaties that came over the next 200-300 years. Look at what was Napoleon actually trying to do? What was Napoleon actually doing? Napoleon was actually trying to undo Westphalia, because it was this oligarchic system rolling out all across Europe, and it was enslaving everybody. And we fought it, King Charles I, His Majesty King Charles I, and Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth I, and His Majesty King Henry VIII were all fighting this for a century before the 1600s. They were trying to prevent this nation state thing coming into being, because it was purely an oligarchic extraction mechanism using the illusion of the state, and thereby using the bureaucratic political system, right? Parliaments, to extract from the people with no check on it, no restraint, no check on it at all.
So to make this kind of simple for those of us with an attention span of 15 seconds, because there are a lot of that in the audience, all these like really cool, deep thoughts that EM has, I think are lost on at least half the audience. And God bless you all. To make it really simple, I would say, like, you can have a land, borders, laws, all of that, and be able to have a court system and all those things without a nation state. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
We've had this
since we were hunter-gatherer peoples. It was a territory. Hell, my cat's got it. I got 5 fucking cats in this big house here. They all got their own little territory. They all got their own little governance, internally and between each other, etc. Animals have that, so point being is the nation state is a totally made up construct, and the reason it was made up was to enslave the people and remove from them the only protectors and shield that they had against this kind of extraction. We went from nobility and formal, classical feudalism where they extracted 1 to 3%, to where what's our tax rate now if you're in the higher bracket? It's almost 90%.
I mean, if you
Yeah.
count everything, it's over 50%. If you count.
Well, in the higher tax rates, it's almost 90%.
It's almost 90%. If you don't do any sort of write-offs, deductions,
correct.
you're at 90%, man.
You're correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
And even with all the write-offs, because there's sales tax and property tax and all these other things you can't write off, right? Luxury tax and all these other things, you're still, I mean, you can work around, but even with the workarounds, the ultra high net worth people are paying over 60% tax. And it's in the form of payroll tax. And, that's the other thing. People are looking at just income tax for the wealthy.
gas tax, sales tax.
It's all the business taxes they're paying. And really it's employment taxes are the big one, right? Paying into the state and federal systems for payrolls, right? Because these high net worth people, we're getting away from that now. It's all in this bloody stock market. But when we had small to medium sized businesses and they were not private equity guys getting in there and raping that, most of the high net worth folks made their money off of employing people, creating jobs. And that's a vast amount of taxes that you can't write off. Now you can write it off on your earnings, but the taxes still get paid on each of your employees and plant and facilities and all this other kinds of stuff. So even with the write-offs that everybody's screaming about, 80+% of all taxes paid are paid by the top 2%. And it's trillions a year.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't need a state for any of that. I'm going to write this in chapter 40 and probably 41 of As Rome Burns right now is what does a modern manorial estate look like? Because that's what we're figuring out right now. What we're figuring out right now is, the nation state, let's just be quite blunt. The nation state is already over. We have 100 million, roughly about 100 million people imported into our country without our will. Do we have a state?
That's a very, very, very good point. Yeah.
Right.
Very good point. Like, what does the government do for the people? Absolutely jack shit.
No, nothing good. They do all kinds of bad things.
Well, the one thing that their enumerated power is the protection of the borders and security of the borders. And we have 100 million people here that nobody wanted.
Yeah.
And the government was involved in it.
A few people wanted, but nobody, 99.99. If you have a large company and you want to hire slave labor that you can cut their paycheck and they can't say shit about it, you want those people.
Well, it's less about that, and it's far more about rents in the form of property rents. And when you do not have a production-based economy, you end up with a rent-based economy. But you need renters, and you don't care if they're peasants from around the world. And you'll subsidize their rents with all kinds of things. But you're getting your rents, the illusion of an economy in the payment of rents, which actually shouldn't be into GDP. Rents should actually come out of GDP because rents are a liability.
They're extractive, yeah.
They're not productive, right? And they're depreciating, rents are depreciating because the asset is not appreciating in value based off of improvements because renters decay things. And the other form of rents is the one that's more insidious, and the other form of rents is taxes. And I wrote a piece on this here recently, right? There is something like almost $1 trillion a year that goes into the tax base because of all these people imported. That's what and that's what props up the bureaucratic feudalist regime and keeps the illusion of all, that we have a state and we have a nation and we have a functioning economy. It's what keeps the illusion going.
Yeah. It's amazing, like, economically where we're at right now, that they're rolling out these 50-year mortgages, right?
Yeah.
And when
indentured servitude.
And 100%. And also the fact is, yesterday the thought hit me because me and some of the hedgies that I speak with, one of the things we go back and forth on is what the hell's really about this, 50-year mortgage. And my thing is this: notice that they're not cutting rates as fast or as quickly as they should. Right. If it's really about stimulating the economy, getting Americans productive, making money cheaper to buy, to really, whatnot, right? Are we at a point, the question that was parsed between us, and we're all kind of crunching numbers, trying to get, trying to figure out the inside of this, right? Are we at a point where they can't lower rates that much further because there's something systemically so broken within the negative feedback loops of the economy that it will trigger something massive, like something cataclysmic that would occur to the economy? Hence, the way to kick the can down the road is, 264-month car payments, 50-year mortgages, insane, crazy stuff like this to keep the circus going.
Yes, two separate things. One, they can't lower rates because they don't have control over rates. Rates are set by the market. They actually are set by the market.
Yeah.
The only thing the Fed can do is provide the illusion of we're in control. It's another illusionary control mechanism. Rates are at the level that they're at because nobody's going to buy the paper at lower rates, not even in the short term. And the other thing that's, so that's one side. Then the other side that you're talking about, the long term, the 50-year mortgage, the 10-year car payments, et cetera. What is all of that? That's indentured servitude. Yeah. It's quite literally indentured servitude. It's modern sharecropping.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, that's exactly what it is. Right. And very much what you're saying is providing the illusion of an economy. Right. And why? Because we're in an economic system where we don't value the economy and GDP based off production. We base it off of return on capital. Correct. And so we associate 90% of what maybe not 90%, but probably 60, 70% of what we use to measure GDP now actually shouldn't be on GDP side. It should be on the liability side, not on the asset side or the equity side. It should be on the liability side in just basic accounting. But what we've done is we've shifted as everything's being stolen and the underlying productivity of the economy's been gone. It's just totally wiped out. What we've done is we've shifted the narratives where we're looking at the liability side of the ledger as if that's GDP. It's not. It actually takes all of that, reduces GDP. Right? So, okay, well, what's on the financial, what's on the liability side of the ledger? Interest payments. So, okay, you want an illusion of an economy, extend out those interest payments. But somebody's buying that paper somewhere, and it ain't us. Well, they're trying to do it through this SOFR bullshit. Not SOFR, but the Genius Act and the
stable coins,
right? They're trying to do it through that bullshit. Just create this total freaking illusion of an economy where we're just the only economy that we have is Americans buying American debt. You boil stable coins down, that's exactly what it is, right? It's creating an illusion of an economy by Americans buying government debt, not even productive debt, government debt, right? Not even corporate junk bonds, government debt, which then makes the government, the bureaucratic feudalist, all powerful because they're the whole economy, right? Yeah. So, and people are looking at the treasuries markets, and they're like, well, there's still appetite. Yeah, sorry, that's not true. What's happening is the Treasury is using short term to buy its own long term debt and cancel that debt.
Yeah,
take a look at it. People take a look at it. Much of the market that we think that's providing the illusion of appetite for U.S. Treasuries is actually the Treasury, just like corporate, stock buybacks. It's basically what we're doing at the nation state level right now. We're using short-term paper to buy the long-term paper and create this illusion that there's appetite for U.S. paper.
Yeah, it's the old curve control. It's just done through the Treasury, so they don't have to call it that.
Yeah, and the other thing is I don't fault them for it because otherwise we'd be collapsed. I mean, we are at a global war right now. We are at war globally, and it's a matter now of who collapses first, Europe, the UK, or the US.
I think it'll be
EU
in that order.
Yeah.
I think it'll be Europe, UK, US. It depends on whether or not UK will make a very quick and hard U-turn from what they've been doing, and I just don't see it as possible.
They can't.
Yeah,
the issue is
they've gone too far.
Yeah, the issue is this: because, and I've only gotten on this. This is why I wrote the piece this morning, yesterday, Panopticon. I've written on some other things. I only got onto the thermodynamic nature of reality on the physics level before, but in terms of all of these systems, and that we are way beyond thermodynamic bounds. And so none of these systems are sustainable anymore because of those reasons alone. And there is no, the second law of thermodynamics has irreversibility. You cannot go back. What's coming? What does that mean? It means the United States of America, as we knew it, is long gone and never coming back. And whether it sustains or continues or not is up for grabs. We don't know.
Yeah. This is the great unknown. This is the great unknown.
Because thermodynamically, we simply can't, and energetically, we simply cannot fake it anymore. And this is what they're trying to do with, literally, when you boil it down to the basis nature, what they're trying to do with all this data center creation and building and massive investment in compute capabilities is put infrastructure in place to fake it for another 100 years, 200 years, by getting us to believe that they have this total absolute power and control, all this computational
Wizard of Oz.
It's all Wizard of Oz. And what is it? It's, if they can convince us that GDP is based off of how effectively we use energy, we are all lost.
Yeah.
We are done. Because it is, one, it's not physically possible. And two, it gets us into so much surreality as to value, right? What's going to happen, so.
I know it's a lot because we are approaching a time when people are overestimating or underestimating the type of work that that automation can do. What is our place in the world? What kind of work can we do? How can humans be productive? And I know we're well past our usual hour, so I don't know if we want to continue with this.
No, keep going.
Yeah, okay. So this is where we're in the great unknown. And we know that this return on energy is an illusion and it's not going to work. And if we continue down this path, it's probably going to collapse us, which we're probably going to have some form of collapse anyway, whether it be a recession, depression, whatever, right? So something's coming.
We've been in a depression since 2012, right?
Sure. But to continue with this concept, whether we're in it now or whether we're going to start feeling the fact that we're in it is a different story. But let's just say that as time goes on, how are humans going to be productive? Because you and I have talked about this on shows, EM, and I think we talked about it in person. UBI is problematic because people need, like people won't, we could even talk about why it's problematic, but let's just bracket that for now and set aside, let's stipulate that we could argue that UBI doesn't work over time. Let's just say that for now. And then we can answer questions about that later. If UBI doesn't work, and if things are becoming increasingly automated, like these Chinese dark factories, right? Then what are humans going to do?
Oh, I thought we were all going to be hairdressers and painters.
No, they got robots that'll eventually do that too. Eventually, might be
we got robots doing surgery, and they're doing better than surgeons. So
don't tell the medical establishment that.
Yeah, well,
you can run a blood panel through Grok, and supposedly it does better than the doctors at diagnoses, which is really further adding a base and question. What the hell are humans going to do when everything is done better than we can do it just by these LLMs and stuff?
Well, I thought we're all going to live in kumbaya, peace and happiness with one another.
Yeah, go back to Esalen. It'll be fun.
Here's the honest. Well played. Here is the reality of human beings. We base our sense of our place and worth off of the contributions we make through our labor. And when you take, and I've watched this as a Green Beret, I've watched it in finance, et cetera. When you take away labor from people, even by giving them luxury, they convert to tribalism, and it becomes ever more violent tribalism, ever more, virulent tribalism, because that's the only way then for them to produce or provide anything to their community and thereby attain a sense of self-worth. This is what this whole wokeist stuff really was. It was people, luxury ideas, luxury, beliefs, with people who had the ability to go into useless, made up fucking, jobs, et cetera, because there was enough wealth thrown at them and in the system. And so what did they do? They went straight to hardcore tribalism and violence. right? Human nature is human nature, and it is not. And we're animals. We are bloody animals, and it is not going to change. And humans at every scale, and they might not like their socioeconomic status, but they can't change it because, I mean, you can work hard and you can improve, right? But we assess individually and collectively our personal individual value based off of our contributions, not our just existing, but our contributions are what internally and externally provide us with a sense of value. And if you take labor away from human beings, intellectual or physical labor, they go to hardcore tribalism, and it goes violent very quick. And once people are in that place, they are self-radicalized, and you cannot de-radicalize people. I mean, you can. It's called a bullet.
Yeah. So again, if we are going to have a problem where labor is taken from people because robots take it, then how do we not, how as a society do we have people find value, right? How is it that we're going to avoid this problem?
So it's a great question, Nick. The only way I can see it, and I've written an article on this about, and I don't think we've talked about it yet, but we need to become, becoming a type 1 civilization is an objective that we really should as a species push for. That's vastly.
Define for the layperson what a type 1 civilization is, EM.
Type 1 civilization, so Kardashev scale, people can look it up, starts with a K, right? Kardashev scale. There's a Russian physicist who worked it out. Excuse me, brilliant fellow. And the scales, it's 0 to 3. I think the fourth one's been added because somebody decided they were smarter than Kardashev, right? That's how things happen. But in essence, what it is it's our ability to effectively and efficiently utilize energy that's around us and available to us at every moment, just because of the nature of physics and chemistry. And type 1 civilization is one where we're able to use vastly more, most of the energy of our sun, right? In all kinds of various ways. And that doesn't mean cover the whole fucking planet with solar cells. You know what? We have the planet covered with solar cells that look really awesome and did really amazing things and fed people and everything else. It's called plants.
Yeah.
Right? So a type 1 civilization is a civilization, and forgive me, people can look it up, but it's a civilization that uses the majority of the energy, the Birkeland current, thermodynamic energy available from their sun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can do astounding things, back to earlier things. So I'm not a doom or gloom guy. We're in a very serious issue because we have got to fundamentally cut through all of this immense amount of deception that's keeping us from two things. One, we do need to try and become a type 1 civilization because, man, there's so many things we can do, things we can, the sci-fi writers that, we all grew up on were telling us about it. A lot of that stuff's possible. It's just not until we get to type 1 civilization where we have that amount of energy and that amount of efficiency of the energy utilization, meaning the universe, there is nothing we can do in energy production that comes even close to what the universe is doing every minute of the day, what our bodies are doing every minute of the day. So the ability to, so there's two related things, to your question. We need to try and become a type 1 civilization. But in order to become and this has been the work for 25 years of my life now, is this second one. In order for us to become a type 1 civilization, though, we need to become type 1 species. And what does that mean to be a type 1 species? And there's an article I wrote, Anthropia, I can't remember the second Latin word, but it's about a type 1 person. What is a type 1 human being? A type 1 human being, which actually to the technocrats and people who are trying to give us these tools, et cetera, makes more possible if you use them in this context. But a type 1 human being is somebody that's able to consciously use vastly more of their own computational capacities. 90+% of most of everybody's brain is used in what's called the default mode network, not in intention networks. And so you're not consciously, unless you do very serious long-term meditative practices, et cetera, and education and training, and self-education and training, et cetera, you still can barely use, most people consciously use somewhere between 1% and 3% of their brain's capacities. People who are highly developed and trained can use up maybe 7 to 10% at the extreme. We need more people who are in the 7 to 10 range. And there's all kinds of things, because the machines are never going to be able to think to get us to a type 1 civilization. Only humans are going to be able to do that thermodynamically again. Right? We don't need to invent all of this vast computational stuff to solve problems. We need to improve humans. Humans have that computational capability already, and vastly beyond anything. Even somebody with Down syndrome has greater computational richness than all of our compute combined. And this isn't to pick on people with Down syndrome, by the way, right? And just articulating that we as a species, as a computationally rich resource, have so much more that we can do. And we need so many more human beings looking at so many more things and vastly deeper scales, but we can't. Why? Because we keep falling for the fucking Panopticon Con. We keep falling for the control mechanisms and believing that the control mechanisms are limitations. And what are the resentfuls constantly telling us? You're dumb. You're not smart. You don't have any power. You can't. Right? Some of the smartest human beings I've ever met in my life were out in the mud hut living places of the world. Why? Because they didn't know what they couldn't. Right?
Yeah.
They didn't know what they couldn't do. They didn't know that there was this total control mechanism. Yeah, they were just living. And they were looking at things true. Right? So what is back to what you're saying, Nick, what we have to do is we need to try to get our species, as many of our species as we can, to be a type 1 human being. And from there, we can get to being a type 1 civilization, and it unlocks the potentials, the capabilities are real, actually, quite literally real. And we have the proof of that in the things we have been able to do technological improvements, quality of life improvements, et cetera, over the last 200 years that haven't been undone because they were all fake. They've been undone because everybody was skimming off the fucking top and not reinvesting in people.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the issue. Becoming a type 1 civilization, which is where we're using all of the power that we can possibly use. We've mastered the power from the planet itself and the sun.
Yeah.
I mean, how many 100 years are we out from that? So I'm not going to live that long, and neither are my kids or grandkids. So while becoming a type 1 civilization is a nice goal, that's not helping me right now.
Nick, hold on a second, man. What did I say? In order to get to type 1 civilization, we have to be a type 1 people, type 1 species. That's the goal right now. The agenda goal right now for you, me personally, I work on it every day. The reason I'm here having these conversations with you smart people is because I work on this, becoming a type 1 human being in myself every single day. Why? And I try to help others, right? Let's cut through the Panopticon, the Great Deception, et cetera. So other people in their own way, because there's, crazy enough, this gets back to Buddha, right? Buddha said, your path is your path. I can't tell you the way there because you're an extraordinarily unique computational resource with extraordinarily unique experiences and environment that you're embedded in. So you're going to have to figure out how to become a type 1 person yourself, and then help your children figure out in their own way, in their own time, as I do with my daughter, how to maybe become a type 1 person themselves. And what is that type 1 person? The type 1 person is somebody who can intentionally use more of their cognitive capacities for intentioned work. And what does that require? That requires cutting out the Great Deception, not falling for the Panopticon Con, because right there alone, you remove 60, 70, 80% of your biological computational overhead, which frees you up for intentioned living.
So in essence, to become a type 1 person, it's like you got to figure that out yourself.
You got to figure. Now, there's some people can help, and there's some tricks, and the first thing is you got to get rid of. You got to stop falling for the Panopticon Con, right? That they have total power and control. They don't. It's not possible in physics and chemistry alone. The other thing is that we have to accept that the singularity happened, but we didn't go into the machine. The machine came into us, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Right? These technical capabilities they provide, like LLMs, are horrible if you don't know what the hell you're doing and you're not careful. But if you are careful and you do know what you're doing and you have enough knowledge and experience of real things, you can use them extraordinarily well. And that, what used to take me weeks or even months of research and studying, finding books and papers and going to the library and all, it's even back then, might have taken me a year or two of study, real diligent study, I can do in minutes now. That's extraordinary. That's amazing, right? We want to keep that, right? But the way in which the control mechanism works now is they've downloaded the Panopticon into us. It's not they cannot technologically do what they say, but they can download the belief of it into us, and we do it ourselves. We limit ourselves. That's what Jeremy Bentham was talking about with the Panopticon, was a type of prison where you needed 1% of the overhead to run the prison, because the prisoners thought that the 100% coverage was there, and so the prisoners self-regulated.
Yeah, what was that? I'll see if I can find it. It's like a 1970s movie, Dinner with Someone.
Mm-hmm.
V might know this one. Dinner with like prison monologue. Dinner with Andre.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if I can bring that up, because that's actually pretty relevant. And it's only it's pretty quick, and it fits. And maybe we can make it like our finishing thought. Let's do a little screen share. Share screen. And let me expand the screen.
CAV.
Yep. Take care, guys. I got a quick call to jump on.